Have you ever felt that a single problem could drown your entire day? That one piece of bad news could poison everything else? What if the secret to peace isn't avoiding problems, but making your heart big enough to hold them? This is the story of Ethan, a young man who learned the difference between being a cup and being the sea. Ethan's mornings had started to feel like endless corridors of worry. He was in his late 20s, but the future felt like a locked door. He had no stable job. His parents, well-meaning but anxious, asked about his future more than his feelings, their questions adding another layer of pressure. He'd send out resumes filled with hope, only to have them fall into a void. Emails went unanswered. Interviews that seemed promising just collapsed into silence. Each day, he woke up bracing for the familiar sting of disappointment. It was a cycle of anxiety and defeat. One gray afternoon, heavy with the weight of his thoughts, Ethan found himself wandering to the old harbor. The air was thick with the smell of rope and salt, a scent that seemed to carry stories of journeys and distant shores. Gulls looped lazily in the sky above, their cries echoing in the quiet air. The old wooden boards of the pier creaked under his feet with each step, like the groan of an old ship. He found a small tea stall and sat down, wrapping his hands around a thin paper cup. He hoped its warmth could somehow seep into him and melt the ice of his anxiety. At a nearby table, 3 retirees were engrossed in a game of chess. Their faces were weathered, etched with the lines of long lives, and they moved their pieces with slow, deliberate hands. Ethan wasn't really listening, but a snippet of their conversation cut through his haze of worry. They were talking about an old tea cellar at the far end of the pier. They spoke of him with a kind of gentle reverence. They said he had a strange gift. He couldn't solve your problems or change your life, but they claimed he had a way of lightening your heart, of making burdens feel less heavy. Curious, and frankly, a little desperate for anything that might offer a sliver of relief, Ethan got up and followed the path down the pier. And there, at the very end, was another small stall. Behind it stood an old man, his hair as white as sea salt, his eyes steady and calm. There was a quiet strength about him, like an ancient cliff that had weathered 1,000 storms. Without much introduction, Ethan began to talk. The words just poured out of him, every rejection, every fear, every morning filled with dread. He spoke of the pressure from his family, the gnawing feeling of being left behind, the silent phone that felt like a judgment. The old man just listened, his gaze never wavering. He listened as though listening itself was an art form, giving Ethan's words the space they needed to exist without judgment. When Ethan finally fell silent, his voice hoarse, the old man simply handed him a fresh paper cup filled with water. Then, he offered him a small pinch of salt from a little wooden bowl. "Stir it," he said softly. "Drink." Ethan did as he was told. He stirred the salt until it dissolved and took a small sip. He immediately grimaced. The taste was sharp, bitter, and unpleasant. "Now," the old man said, his voice still calm, "take another pinch." The same amount. He gestured toward the vast expanse of the sea stretching out before them. "Throw it into the sea." Ethan walked to the edge of the pier and obeyed. He tossed the small pinch of salt into the churning waves. It vanished instantly, swallowed by the immense body of water without a trace. "Taste again," the old man said, pointing to the sea. Confused but compliant, Ethan bent down. He scooped a little of the seawater into his hand and brought it to his lips. He sipped. He paused, surprised. He looked back at the old man and whispered, almost to himself, "I can't taste the salt at all." The old man nodded slowly, a knowing look in his calm eyes. "Pain is like salt," he explained. "The amount of pain in life remains the same. But the bitterness we taste depends entirely on the container we put it in. If your heart is a small cup, even a little pain will poison everything. But if your heart is as wide as the sea, the same pain dissolves." In that moment, something inside Ethan loosened. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a miracle. But it was something just as powerful. It was space. The weight on his chest didn't disappear, but it suddenly felt like he had more room to breathe around it. If this story is touching you, my friend, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It helps us bring you more inspiring and powerful stories like this one. And if you're enjoying it, leave a like. It truly means a lot to us and keeps our small community growing. Thank you so much for being here. From that day on, Ethan began a small, quiet experiment with himself. Each time a worry tried to overwhelm him, each time a rejection stung, he would close his eyes and ask himself, "Can I make my container bigger?" This wasn't a one-time fix. It was a practice. He started taking longer walks, not just to get from one place to another, but to feel the world around him. He walked through parks, letting his breath sink with the rustling of the leaves in the trees. He started to write his fears down on paper. Transferring them from the storms inside his head to simple ink on a page made them feel more manageable, less chaotic. He decided to volunteer at a local community kitchen. He spent his Saturday mornings serving hot meals, using both hands to help others. He learned that the simple act of generosity has a way of stretching the heart, of making your own world feel a little bit bigger by stepping into someone else's. The failures didn't just vanish. He still flunked some interviews. He still got those familiar rejection emails. But the bitterness no longer filled the entire cup of his experience. The pain was there, but it didn't poison the taste of everything else. When it rained, he would stand on a bridge and watch the river swell below. He'd whisper to himself, "Tonight, there is more water than salt." The pain was just one drop in a much larger river. On one of his later visits to the harbor, the old tea seller gave him one more piece of wisdom. He told Ethan, "Hold your problem in the palm of your hand, not in your fist. If you squeeze it, clenching your fist around it, it will sting and burn. But if you keep your hand open, it rests there, cooled by the air, and you can see it for what it is." The years that followed didn't make Ethan's life perfect. Life is never perfect, but they made him expansive. He eventually found a job he enjoyed, reconnected with his family on a deeper level, and built a life that felt authentic. He learned that pain doesn't disappear, you don't just get over it, but it doesn't get to define everything. It doesn't have to be the only thing you taste. So if you re-listening to this with your own pouch of salt, maybe it is news you didn't want, a plan that fell apart, or a fear that keeps returning night after night, remember Ethan's lesson. You don't need to erase the salt, you just need to make your heart bigger. Start with a pond, then become a lake. And when you can, be the sea. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and hitting that follow button so you don't miss our next one. We're so grateful to have you as part of our community. Until next time, be well.